My name is Eleanor Vance, and for 18 years, I believed my life was a quiet composition, a gentle melody played in the key of contentment. I lived in Port Blossom, a town nestled on the Oregon coast where the mist hangs in the pines like a sigh, and the air always smells of salt and damp earth. I was a librarian, a curator of stories, and I thought I knew the narrative of my own life by heart. It was a simple story, co-authored with my husband, David, a man I'd loved since college. He was a financial advisor, steady and reliable, the anchor to my more whimsical, literary soul. Our masterpiece, our single greatest creation, was our daughter, Clara. At 12, Clara was a world unto herself. She was quiet, observant, with eyes the color of a stormy sea that seemed to see right through the fragile facades of the world. She didn't have the easy, bubbly charm of other girls her age. Instead, she possessed a deep, still-water intensity. While I found comfort in the paper and ink worlds of the library, Clara found her solace in the digital realm, in the elegant logic of code and the intricate pathways of the internet. Our home was a 100-year-old craftsman bungalow with a sprawling garden I tended with religious devotion. It was, I thought, a fortress of love and stability, a place where the chaotic stories of the world couldn't touch us. I was wrong. A story's most devastating plot twist is the one you never see coming, even when the clues have been laid on every page. The end began not with a bang, but with the quiet, deliberate snap of a suitcase latch. I'd come home from the library, my arms full of groceries and the scent of rain clinging to my coat, to find David in our bedroom. He wasn't frantic or panicked. He was methodical, folding his shirts with an unnerving precision, placing them into a sleek, unfamiliar suitcase. The air was thick with a silence that was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. "David, what are you doing?" My voice sounded thin, a foreign sound in the quiet room. "Are you going on a business trip I forgot about?" He didn't look at me. He simply laid a pair of trousers flat and smoothed them with the palm of his hand. "I'm leaving, Ellie." The grocery bag slipped from my grasp. Oranges rolled across the hardwood floor, a sudden burst of absurd color in a world that had just turned gray. "Leaving? Leaving for where? For how long?" He finally turned, and his eyes, the same warm brown eyes that had looked at me with adoration on our wedding day, were polished stones. There was no pain, no remorse, just a chilling, placid finality. "I'm not coming back." The words didn't compute. They were a foreign language, a code I couldn't decipher. We had just planned our summer garden last weekend. He had kissed my forehead that morning before leaving for work. We were Eleanor and David. We were a constant. "I don't understand," I whispered, my hands starting to tremble. Is it something I did?" A flicker of something, annoyance, perhaps, crossed his face. "This isn't about you, not really. It's about me. I need to live. I feel like I haven't been able to breathe for years." Breathe? We lived in a town where the air was washed clean by the Pacific Ocean every single day. But I knew, with the sickening lurch of intuition I'd been suppressing for months, that this wasn't about oxygen. It was about the late nights he called client dinners, the new password-protected phone he claimed was for work, the way he'd started to look at me not as his wife, but as a feature of the landscape he was tired of seeing. "There's someone else, isn't there?" The question was a raw, wounded thing. He paused, his hand hovering over a stack of sweaters. He didn't have the decency to lie. He just didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. He zipped the suitcase. The sound was a serrated blade drawing a line through our life, separating the before from the terrifying after. "I'll need my half of the savings," he said, his voice all business. "I've already initiated the transfer, and I'll need you to sign some papers when my lawyer sends them over." The mention of money jolted me from my stupor. Our savings. The house. Clara's college fund. The future we had so carefully built, brick by financial brick. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of shock. I ran downstairs, my socked feet slipping on the polished wood. Clara was at the kitchen table, her laptop open, a half-eaten apple beside it. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Mom? What's wrong?" You look pale. Nothing, sweetheart. Dad's, just packing. The lie was ash in my mouth. I snatched my own laptop from the counter, my fingers fumbling as I typed in the password to our joint bank account. The page loaded. I stared, my mind refusing to process the numbers. Or the lack of them. Our joint checking account, $186.42. Our joint savings account, our nest egg for emergencies, $0. And Clara's college fund, the account we'd started the day she was born, the one that should have held over $82,000. It was empty. A perfect, devastating zero. No, I breathed. No, no, no. I hit the refresh button, a desperate, useless prayer. The numbers remained. I clicked on the transaction history. 3 days ago. While I was shelving books at the library's summer reading kickoff, David had systematically drained every account. Not his half. Everything. My breath came in ragged gasps. I felt the room tilt. The cheerful yellow of the kitchen walls turning sickly. I called the bank, my voice shaking so badly I could barely speak the security questions. A polite, detached voice on the other end confirmed my worst fears. As a joint account holder, David had every legal right. The transfers were complete. The money was gone. Mom. Clara's voice cut through the static in my head. You're scaring me. I looked at my daughter. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, her expression one of intense concentration as she watched me. She had no idea her father had just sold her future for a new life. The sound of the suitcase wheels on the hardwood floor made us both turn. David stood in the entryway, looking not at us, but at the front door, as if we were merely obstacles in his path. That's it. I found my voice, and it was laced with a fury I didn't know I possessed. 18 years, a child, a home, and you just walk out without a word? He paused, his hand on the doorknob. It's cleaner this way, Ellie. No fighting. I don't want clean, David. I want you to look at your daughter and tell her why you're doing this. Clara stood up from the table. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just stood there, straight and still, and watched him with those ancient, knowing eyes. David's gaze flickered to her for a fraction of a second. You'll understand when you're older, Clara, he said, the words hollow and meaningless. He looked back at me. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. The sound echoed in the sudden, vast silence of the house. Outside, an unfamiliar car engine started and faded into the distance. We stood there for a long time, me and Clara. In the wreck of our lives. The refrigerator hummed. A lone orange lay under the kitchen table. Is he coming back? Clara's voice was quiet, almost academic. I wanted to lie. I wanted to wrap her in my arms and tell her this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But looking at her solemn, composed face, I knew she deserved the truth. She had always deserved the truth. I don't think so, baby. She nodded once, a small, sharp movement. Her eyes shifted to my laptop, still open on the counter, displaying the columns of zeros. Did he take the money? She asked. The question stunned me. How did she know to even ask that? Some of it, I hedged, trying to shield her from the full devastation. My college fund, too? I couldn't speak. I could only nod. A fresh wave of nausea rising in my throat. Clara took a deep breath. She walked over to her half-eaten apple, picked it up, and dropped it into the compost bin. She wiped her hands on a dish towel. Then she turned to face me, her young face set with a gravity that didn't belong on a 12-year-old. Mom, don't worry, she said, her voice clear and steady. I've been handling it. The words were so bizarre, so utterly out of place, that I almost laughed. Handling what? She was a child whose world had just been torn apart. But the look in her eyes wasn't childish. It was a look of focus, of grim competence. It was the look of a strategist surveying a battlefield. What do you mean, sweetheart? She picked up her backpack from the floor. My bus comes in 10 minutes. We can talk about it after school. And then she walked out the door, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of our violated home. With the ghost of a question hanging in the air, what, in God's name, had my daughter been handling? The first week was a blur of muted grief. The house felt cavernous, each room a museum of a life that was no longer mine. I found one of David's stray socks under the bed and wept for an hour. I'd catch myself about to call out to him with a question about the garden, or see a book at the library he would have loved, and the pain would hit me anew, a physical blow. Through it all, Clara was an island of unnerving calm. She moved through the wreckage of our lives with a quiet efficiency that bordered on surreal. Her routine didn't just continue, it seemed to intensify. She was up at 6:30, her bed made, her homework finished before I even managed to make coffee. She packed her own lunch, laid out her clothes for the next day, and spoke to me in calm, even tones, asking if I'd remembered to eat. It was like she had become the parent, and I, the lost child. "Are you sure you're okay, honey?" I asked her one morning, my hand on her shoulder as she stood by the door. She looked at me, her gaze steady. "I'm fine, Mom. Are you?" I wasn't. I was drowning, but I couldn't put that weight on her. "Just checking." "I know," she said, and for a moment, her hand squeezed mine. "We're going to be okay." That evening, desperate for an adult voice, I called my sister, Kate. As I dialed, a strange sound drifted down from upstairs. A rapid, rhythmic clicking. "Ellie? You sound exhausted." Kate's voice was a warm blanket of concern. "I am," I confessed, sinking into the sofa. "It's Clara, Kate. I'm so worried." She's too okay. She hasn't shed a single tear. Kids have their own ways of coping. I'll remember when Dad left. You were a mess for weeks." I got angry and threw my baseball through the garage window. The clicking from upstairs paused, then resumed with even greater fervor. "What is that noise?" Kate asked. "Oh, it's just Clara on her computer. Homework, I guess. Or games." But as I said it, a sliver of doubt wedged its way into my mind. The sound wasn't random like a game. It was methodical, relentless. After the call, I made Clara's favorite comfort food, creamy tomato soup and grilled cheese. I carried the tray up to her room and knocked softly. "Come in." I pushed the door open. Clara was at her desk, her laptop angled away from me. She snapped it shut the moment I entered. "Dinner time, sweet pea." "Thanks, Mom." She took the tray, her eyes avoiding mine. As I set it on her nightstand, I glanced at her desk. It was neatly organized, textbooks, a planner, a stack of blank paper. But there was an almost staged quality to it, as if she had arranged it for my benefit. "What were you working on?" I asked, trying for a casual tone. "A history project," she said smoothly. "The telegraph and its impact on communication." She opened her laptop again, but not before I saw a flash of the screen. It wasn't a word processor. It was lines of green text on a black background, something that looked like a command prompt from an old movie. "Need any help with it?" "I'm good. Thanks for dinner, Mom." It was a polite dismissal. I kissed the top of her head and left, the feeling of unease growing into a quiet dread. What was she hiding? The pattern continued. I spent my days in a fog, calling lawyers and credit card companies, trying to piece together the financial devastation. Each night, the sound of Clara's furious typing filled the house. On Friday evening, I was putting away her clean laundry when my hand brushed against a book on her desk. A single sheet of paper was sticking out from its pages. I knew I shouldn't look. It was a violation of her privacy, the one thing she seemed to be guarding so fiercely. But I was her mother, and I was terrified. I pulled the paper out. It was an email thread, printed in a tiny font. My blood ran cold. The names at the top were David and Colette. I sank onto Clara's bed, my hands shaking as I read. The messages were from weeks ago, before he'd left. They were intimate, full of shared jokes and plans. They discussed real estate listings in a city I'd never heard of, a place called Sandpiper Cove in Florida. They talked about selling David's firm, liquidating assets. And then I saw the line that made my stomach revolt. "We just have to manage the Ellie situation carefully. Once the funds are secure, it'll be a clean break." "Mom?" I jumped, clutching the paper. Clara stood in the doorway, holding her empty soup bowl. She looked from the paper in my hand to my face, and her expression wasn't one of a child caught in a lie. It was one of weary resignation. She closed the door behind her. "Clara, where did you get this?" My voice was a whisper. "Dad's password is Clara 2011, she said simply. "The year I was born. He uses it for everything. His email, his cloud storage, his work portal. He's sentimental. And careless." A wave of dizziness washed over me. How long have you known about her?" "About 6 weeks, she said, sitting beside me on the bed. For the first time, she looked her age. Small and vulnerable. "About the money. I figured that out the day before he left. I saw him accessing the accounts from his work computer. 6 weeks. While I had been blissfully tending my garden and planning our summer. My 12-year-old daughter had been carrying this toxic secret alone." "Oh, honey, why didn't you tell me?" Her jaw tightened. "I wanted to be sure. And I wanted to have a plan. Telling you without a plan would just make you sad. Sad doesn't solve anything. Clara, this is not your burden to carry. It's not a child's job to make a plan." "Yes, it is," she insisted, her voice gaining strength. "He stole my future. He lied to us. Someone had to do something." I looked at the young girl beside me, and it was like seeing her for the first time. The quietness I'd mistaken for shyness was actually observation. The intensity I'd seen as a quirk was focus. "What else do you know?" I asked, my voice trembling. She stood up, walked to her bookshelf, and pulled out a thick, spiral-bound notebook. It was a standard school notebook, the kind used for biology or English. She handed it to me. The cover read, "Project Nightingale." I opened it. The pages were filled with her neat, precise handwriting. There were flowcharts, lists of account numbers, IP addresses, and dates. There were screenshots of text messages, financial statements, and what looked like internal documents from David's company, Crestview Financial. My daughter hadn't just stumbled upon an email. She had been conducting a full-scale investigation. "Clara, what is all this?" "Research," she said. "Dad thought he was clever, but he left digital footprints everywhere. Colette is even worse. Her work password is her dog's name and the year she adopted him. I found that on her Instagram." I flipped through page after page of meticulous, damning evidence. My 12-year-old had hacked into their lives. "Honey, this is illegal." She looked me straight in the eye, her expression hard. "So is stealing $82,000 from a child's education fund. So is identity theft." "Identity theft?" She nodded, turning back to her laptop. "This is the part one haven't figured out how to solve yet." She clicked open a folder labeled Finances_Active_Threats. On the screen were loan applications and credit card statements, all under my name and, impossibly, under hers. "He didn't just take our money, Mom. He used our identities. That $82,000 from my college fund wasn't for their new life. It was a down payment. They applied for a $500,000 mortgage to buy a house in Florida. They used your credit score and my social security number to secure other loans to furnish it. They were planning to default on everything and leave us with the debt." The world swam before my eyes. He hadn't just left us. He had tried to bury us. But what do we do? I felt helpless. A tiny boat in a hurricane. Clara closed the laptop. The quiet confidence was back in her voice. "That's the part I'm working on now," she said. She looked at me. And her eyes were no longer the eyes of a child. They were the eyes of a protector. A warrior. "Don't worry, Mom. I told you. I'm handling it." And for the first time since David had walked out, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. It was a terrifying, unfamiliar feeling, hope. And it was all because of the strange, formidable, brilliant little girl sitting in front of me. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks after David had left. I was in the kitchen, staring at a stack of bills I had no idea how to pay, when my phone buzzed with his name. My first instinct was a jolt of hope. Maybe he was sorry. Maybe he was coming home. I answered, my hand trembling. "Ellie." His voice was not apologetic. It was tight, strained. "We need to talk. Something is happening." I glanced toward the living room, where Clara was at the coffee table, ostensibly reading a book, her laptop open beside her. "What's wrong, David?" "My accounts are frozen. All of them. The bank said there's a fraud alert from a federal agency." And Colette. Ellie, she was fired yesterday. They walked her out of her office. They're accusing her of embezzlement, of stealing from her clients. Clara looked up from her book, her expression placid. She typed a few keys on her laptop. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "But I don't see what it has to do with me. It has to be connected. It's too much of a coincidence. Someone is targeting us, Ellie. Someone who knows their way around a computer." There was a new sound on his end of the line, frantic typing. "Wait. What the hell?" "Someone's in my email account. Right now. I'm watching the cursor move on its own." Clara's fingers danced across her keyboard, a silent, deadly ballet. Her face was illuminated by the glow of the screen, her expression one of intense focus. "David, maybe you've been hacked," I said, the words feeling strange and powerful in my mouth. "Did you hire someone, Ellie? A private investigator? A hacker? Because if you did, you need to call them off. This is serious. This is a criminal offense." I looked at Clara. She met my gaze and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "I didn't hire anyone, David. It was the truth." "Then who?" "Hold on." His voice rose in panic. "Oh my God. They just sent an email from my account to the senior partners at my firm. It has attachments. It looks like my personal financial records." Clara minimized one window on her screen and opened another. I saw a flash of what looked like the Crestview Financial Company logo before she tilted the screen away. "What kind of records?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound not with fear, but with a strange, fierce thrill. "Everything. The transfers from our accounts. The mortgage application. They're posting it on my company's internal server. They're ruining me." His breathing was ragged. "The police won't help. They said if the information is accurate. It's not slander, it's whistleblowing." He paused, and I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head. How could they have this information unless... The realization was dawning on him. Someone hadn't just made things up. They had the truth. "Ellie, you have to believe me," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "The money, it was just a loan. Colette knew this investor. A guaranteed return. We were going to double it, triple it, and put it all back before you even noticed. We were doing it for our family's future." Clara looked up from her laptop, and her expression was one of pure, cold disdain. She had heard the lie, and she was not impressed. "Our family, David?" I said, the words dripping with ice. "You mean your new family?" He started to babble about pressure, about Colette's disapproving father, a wealthy surgeon she was trying to impress. He was trying to build a narrative where he was the victim. Clara closed her laptop with a soft click. She stood up, walked over to me, and held out her hand for the phone. Her eyes were clear and resolute. I gave it to her. She put it on speakerphone. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice perfectly level. "Clara?" "Oh, thank God, sweetheart. Listen to me. Someone is telling terrible lies about me and Colette. You have to tell your mother I would never, ever steal from you." "But you did steal from me," Clara stated, as if discussing a math problem. "You transferred $82,450 from my Vanguard 529 plan on October 17th at 2:15 p.m. You used it as a down payment for a property at 14 Hibiscus Lane in Sandpiper Cove, Florida, with your mistress, Colette Dubois." The silence on the other end was absolute. "Clara, how do you know that?" David's voice was a choked whisper. "I also know about the fraudulent credit cards you opened in Mom's name and the 2 personal loans you took out using my social security number. That's a federal crime, Dad. Identity theft involving a minor carries a very stiff penalty. That's not possible. You're a child. You don't understand these things. I understand that you and Colette were planning to leave us with over $100,000 in fraudulent debt while you started your new life. I have copies of everything. The emails, the text messages, the forged loan documents. I've been watching you for weeks." A strangled sound came through the phone. "Watching me? I know about the burner phone you kept in your briefcase. I know that Colette has been systematically embezzling funds from her elderly clients for over a year to finance your lifestyle. I know her father, Dr. Alastair Dubois, found out about the investigation at her firm this morning and has completely cut her off. And I know," she paused, delivering the final blow with surgical precision, "that she blocked your number an hour ago." "Clara, please," he sobbed, the sound raw and broken. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I'm your father. I love you. I'm living out of my car. I can't. Please stop." Clara took a deep breath. She looked at me, her stormy eyes holding mine. "You taught me a valuable lesson, Dad," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "You taught me that you can't always count on the people who are supposed to protect you. So sometimes you have to learn to protect yourself." And with that, she ended the call. The silence that filled the kitchen was profound. Clara calmly placed my phone on the counter. "He won't bother us again," she said. "How can you be so sure?" I asked, my own voice trembling. She looked at me, a 12-year-old girl with the weary wisdom of an ancient general. "Because he's scared of me now. And he should be." She turned and walked back to the living room, picking up her book as if she hadn't just orchestrated the complete and total annihilation of a grown man's life. I stood alone in the kitchen, stunned into silence, realizing that my quiet, bookish daughter was the most formidable person I had ever known. And she had just saved us. In the weeks that followed, a new kind of quiet settled over our house. It wasn't the heavy, grief-stricken silence of before, but a peaceful, focused one. I began the slow, painful process of legally and financially untangling myself from David. With the evidence Clara had meticulously compiled, my lawyer was optimistic. "Frankly, Mrs. Vance," she'd said, looking over the files, "your daughter has done 90% of my work for me. This is the most well-documented case of marital fraud I've ever seen." My main concern, however, was Clara. I watched her, worried about the toll her secret war had taken on her soul. Had she been forced to build walls so high she'd never feel safe enough to be a child again? On the recommendation of our family doctor, I took her to see a child psychologist, a kind woman named Dr. Anya Sharma. I sat in the waiting room, wringing my hands, expecting to hear that Clara was suffering from profound trauma. When Dr. Sharma called me in after the session, her expression was one of awe. "Mrs. Vance," she began, "your daughter is one of the most resilient individuals I have ever met. Many children in her situation would internalize the blame or retreat into depression. Clara externalized the problem. She saw a threat, analyzed it, and neutralized it. From a psychological standpoint, it's a remarkably effective coping mechanism. But is it healthy?" I asked, my voice tight with worry. Should a child be so ruthless? She wasn't being ruthless, Eleanor. She was enforcing a boundary. Her father crossed a fundamental line of trust and safety. Clara simply restored order to her world in the only way she knew how. Her actions weren't about revenge. They were about justice and protection. Walking out of the office, Clara seemed lighter. "Dr. Sharma is smart," she said. "She gets it." That evening, I found Clara at her laptop again. But this time, the screen wasn't filled with lines of code or financial data. It was a brightly colored website she was building from scratch. The title at the top read, "The Nightingale Project." "What's this, honey?" She turned the screen toward me. "It's for other kids. And for parents who don't know what to look for." The site was a resource hub. It had articles she'd written in clear, simple language: how to spot digital footprints, understanding password security, what is a 529 plan, and how to protect it. There was a secure, anonymous forum where people could share their stories and ask for advice. After Dad called, she explained, I started looking online. It turns out what he did is not that uncommon. Spouses hiding assets, parents taking kids' savings. People are getting hurt because they don't know how to protect themselves in a digital world. So, I'm teaching them. Tears welled in my eyes. She hadn't just built walls to protect herself. She was building a fortress to protect everyone. She had taken the ugliest chapter of our lives and was turning it into a guidebook of hope for others. Her project gained quiet traction. People from all over the country started using her resources. She spent her evenings not just on homework, but on answering desperate messages in her forum, guiding a teenager in Texas on how to talk to a school counselor about a missing trust fund, helping a woman in Florida find resources for reporting identity theft. She did it all under the anonymous pseudonym Nightingale. About 6 months after David left, I came home to find a long, official-looking envelope on the kitchen table addressed to Clara. It was from a San Francisco tech firm specializing in cybersecurity. "They found me," Clara said calmly, handing me the letter. Somehow, they traced Nightingale back to me. The letter was a formal job offer. Not for the future, but for now. A consulting position in their new youth digital safety division. It came with a full scholarship to Stanford and a starting salary that made me sit down abruptly. "Clara, this is life-changing," I whispered, staring at the numbers. She nodded. "I know." She took the letter back and laid it on the counter. "I'm going to turn it down." "What?" "Why?" "Because they want to own the Nightingale project," she said. "They want to put it behind a paywall. They want to turn helping people into a product. That's not the point." She looked out the window at the garden, where the first spring crocuses were pushing through the soil. "The point is to make sure no one feels as alone as we did." Instead, she filed the paperwork to turn the Nightingale Project into an official nonprofit organization. Our small apartment became its headquarters. My part-time librarian salary kept us afloat, but it was Clara, my brilliant, formidable daughter, who was building our future. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, a comfortable silence between us, Clara looked up from her laptop. "Mom," she said, her tone thoughtful, "do you ever miss him?" I considered the question honestly. "I miss the man I thought he was," I said softly. "I miss the life I thought we had. But the man who walked out that door? No, I don't miss him." She nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "Me too." She went back to her work, and I watched her, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. David's betrayal had been a fire, intended to burn our lives to the ground. But he had underestimated us. He had underestimated the quiet strength of a mother's love, and he had catastrophically underestimated the righteous, logical fury of his own daughter. The fire hadn't destroyed us. It had forged us. It had burned away the illusions and left behind something stronger, truer. It had revealed the core of who we were: survivors, protectors. And in Clara's case, a quiet, unassuming hero, typing away in a small apartment in a misty town by the sea, building a better, safer world, one line of code at a time. Our story wasn't over. It felt as though it had just truly begun.